I'm here with Congresswoman Gwen Moore to discuss what's being done in Washington to prevent sexual assaults from happening on campuses across the country. Thanks so much for joining us today, Representative Moore.
Oh, Trey, I'm so delighted that you wanted to have this conversation with me.
Sure, and I know that you were elected to Congress in 2004 from Wisconsin's 4th Congressional District. When you first got to Congress, what did you want to advocate for?
Well, Trey, I can tell you that my focus in the state legislature, where I was elected for 20 years before I came to Congress, my focus was on really supporting vulnerable communities, people who were poor, women, and children. And so the extent to which I've been involved in violence against women is really a continuation of the work that I had done in the state legislature.
Sure, and I know you played a large role in the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act recently. What was your part in that reauthorization, and can you explain the act and what it does to protect women across the country?
Well, the Violence Against Women Act has really been in place since 1994. It's an extremely comprehensive piece of legislation that provides financial resources on best practices to shelters, to law enforcement agencies, to DA's offices, to advocacy groups, to really intervene in situations where mostly women, but men as well, but mostly women would find themselves in a situation where they were being abused, raped, and would have no temporary housing, shelter, or legal resources to extract themselves from that situation. It's been reauthorized since 1994. But what we found when we arrived in Congress here, there was a reluctance to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act based on recommendations that had been made by law enforcement officials, advocacy groups, community organizations, shelter providers, based on best practices and the voids that they had seen in the act. That is that we were not serving Native American women very well because there was no jurisdiction for local authorities on tribal lands, and tribal authorities didn't have the authority to arrest non-tribal members on tribal lands. Real gap in law enforcement authority there. There were numbers of U visas that needed to be available to immigrant women to protect them from violence. Many perpetrators were controlling women through their purses, literally. We have seen that, and through their not having attained citizenship. And we also saw that lesbians, homosexual women were not being adequately protected under the law, particularly in the area of housing and to some extent in law enforcement. So we needed to be explicit in the updated version of the Violence Against Women Act that these were also protected groups. There was a great deal of reluctance on the part of the majority in the House of Representatives. And so it failed in the 112th Congress, and then we redoubled our efforts in the 113th Congress, had Native Americans, flood Congress really demanding that we pass the Violence Against Women Act. We had partnerships with LGBT groups and with the advocacy groups and everyone who wanted to see this law apply literally to all women.
Sure, and what have you said to opponents of the act who say maybe it creates an ideology that all men are guilty and all women are victims? And could you expand more on, who can be affected by sexual violence?
Well, there's no secret. We've seen this particularly in the area of sexual assaults in the military. There's no secret that men can and are victims of sexual assault as well as women. But there's no sense in denying that 95% plus of all victims of sexual assault, rape, domestic violence are women. That's an unfortunate fact. And so we needed, this act is very important for carving out those protections for women. It's not a matter of trying to make all men guilty of sexual assault or rape. It's a matter of protecting women. 3 women a day die from domestic violence. An overwhelming number of rapes are not even reported because of fear that there will be no action or there'd be recriminations against the victim. Certainly sexual assault, rape, violence scars women for life and also has a very adverse impact on their children. Often you see the whole cycle of victimization move from generation to generation because of what kids have experienced.
Thank you. And I want to know a little bit more about sexual assault on college campuses. How common is sexual assault on college campuses, and what is being done to prevent that from happening? I know the SAVE Act specifically addresses at the college level what is being done.
Well, actually, yes. I was very fortunate to be able to offer the SAVE Act as an update to the Clery Act and Title IX, which really specifies that sexual assaults, violence against women has to be reported to law enforcement, violence that occurs on campuses. But there were huge gaps in that law that the SAVE Act has filled. First of all, really putting forth some sort of university, college agenda, basically protocol for how they will handle these incidents. What will exactly be the punishments? How giving the victims their rights and opportunities, helping them connect with law enforcement. We also thought it was extremely important to educate people on campus, other students, because often there are men or other folks, they're bystanders who think, oh, gee, this is none of my business. This is something that's happened between a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So we needed to educate other students on campus who might be bystanders. Also needed to educate young men, because a lot of young men think this is just a sort of a rite of passage, might be some hazing with a fraternity or something. That no, this is unacceptable behavior. And so the SAVE Act really just sort of expands and updates the Clery Act.
Sure. Do you feel that lawmakers often overlook the importance of bringing sexual assault and sexual violence to the agenda? And if so, what can you do as a congresswoman to combat that issue and really raise awareness not only at the college level, but in Washington?
Well, just let me say this. Once the Violence Against Women Act hit the floor, it was supported overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis. I don't know that sexual assault is ignored by lawmakers, but the nature of the crime of sexual assault is secretive. It's a crime of shame. It's a crime that is underreported. And it's a crime that doesn't impact you until it impacts you. Often it's very difficult for people to understand what an adverse impact it has on a person when it hasn't happened to them. I have heard many people say many callous things to victims. Why don't it was a terrible thing. Why don't you just get over it and move on? Which is a reflection of their lack of appreciation about the traumatic event that this poses for many victims that they may never recover from without adequate support and counseling, and sometimes even medication.
Sure. How important is an organization like RAINN that offers that support and that education for victims and family and friends of victims who are trying to help survivors move past this horrible thing that's happened to them?
Well, listen, I appreciate RAINN because it is the largest organization devoted to combating sexual assault and rape in the nation, has a tremendous network, and really targets its activities and media events toward young people, and has set aside a national awareness date, September 26th, so that we can reach out to the larger community in the United States and make them aware of the importance of obliterating this scourge from our culture and our society.
As a public figure, someone that a lot of young people look up to, what would you say to survivors of sexual assault to encourage them to get the help that they need and that will really help them move forward and finish their education and become leaders in their own communities?
I would say that I have been there. I have been a victim of sexual assault as a child, as a college student, as a young woman. And so what I would say to them is it's important to move from victimhood, victim stance, to victor. And it's very important, you know, and one of the ways that I moved from victim stance to victor was to actually talk about it, actually own it as one of the experiences that I had, but one of the experiences that I survived. And one of the experiences, and to call upon my resilience as a human being, to use this experience to really encourage other people who might be looking at me and listening to me right now, that you can go on and you can help other people overcome this as well. And so I would say move from victim to victory.
As a college student, having to go through a traumatic experience and coming out of it as a policymaker and someone who can help others, what would you say to students who have been affected by sexual assault?
I would say to students who've been affected by sexual assault, it's not your fault. So don't really hide it under the bushel. You should definitely not allow someone to get away with it and think that you're their only victim. Because surely if they get away with it, having assaulted you, that they will go on to victimize someone else, someone who may not be as resilient as you are, someone who may not have the ego strength to go on. And so definitely, you should not allow your sexual assault to go unanswered.
And finally, students who might not have been affected by sexual assault but are interested in getting involved in starting a discussion on college campuses, what would you say to them? Do you have a call to action for them?
I have a call to action to them. First of all, never say to anybody, just get over it, you know. But I think it's really important, you know, first thing I'd say to men is that I think men ought to realize that this is a very inappropriate rite of passage. So often, you know, basically decent young men have found themselves sexually assaulting women over a bet. Bet you can't bed her down. And that's rape. That's not a rite of passage. Often, you know, men think that it's, you know, it might be, hey man, she was a virgin and I was the first one having no, you know, I think men need to really confront their associates and their friends about Neanderthal views about women and sexuality. And that would be a great favor, not only to women and to the community, but to themselves too, for them to have some integrity and brings that integrity to the table. And to women, what I would say is that it's extremely important to support your girlfriend's desires to mate and hook up, but you should always follow some basic rules. If you go in a group with women, stay in the group. I think so much about Natalie Holloway, not allowing your friends, like you wouldn't give them your keys when they're drunk. Don't let them follow behind someone alone when you've come in a group. And I would say that sexual assault is everybody's problem on campus. And that it ought to be taken very seriously. Young people like you, Trey, if you have special projects, you know, you can choose any subject that you want, many other worthy subjects like diabetes and heart disease. Choose sexual assault and doing research on it and making people aware of the extent to which this is a problem, and trying to make sure that everybody around you is educated about it so that they can support victims and so that they can prevent these assaults among their peers.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Representative Moore. It was wonderful talking with you, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank
Trey.
you very much.